welcome back to another video. I know it's been a good 4 months, and I'm beginning to think that that is my usual trajectory for putting out a video once every 4 months, but that's just the way that it is. As titled by today's video, today we're going to be doing kind of like I'm going to be taking you through the process of me making my first book from scratch, and physically actually making it. So this is my final project basically. Sorry, I feel like I'm gonna move this because it's like obstructing the light. So basically for my final course, not my final course, for the last course, I kind of, it's very open-ended, so we could basically do whatever we wanted, but it had to reflect the work that we want to do in the current standing that we see ourselves as like illustrators and artists. And that's basically the gist of the brief. And I wanted to kind of talk you through what my process was, because it was like I was working on this for around all of December, and that's why I really didn't film. Even though I had a break, it was really stressful just trying to get everything done, and like I had friends visiting and stuff like that for Christmas, so it was just, I couldn't film the way I wanted to film. And even November, I don't know why I didn't film then. The first 3 months, like I'm finally now starting to feel a lot more settled in London. I think when I first came, I was very, like, I think you could tell in like my last video with like my first week in art school, I was really overwhelmed, and I think I was overwhelmed for like a few months, and I didn't really feel homesick. I think I felt homesick once, but that was about it. Like I surprisingly did not feel homesick at all. I just kind of felt like, oh, this is a big change, and I didn't really, it's almost like my brain wasn't fully processing that I was living abroad, you know what I mean? Especially I think when you've wanted something for so long and it finally happens, it's almost like a what was I waiting for kind of situation. I think just like realizing, oh holy shit, now I'm like 24. I turned 24 like last week, but it was kind of like oh, like, because in my head I always had this idea that like a 24-year-old would be like an adult, and it's kind of like really, I'm like, wow, I'm not like in my late teens moving. I'm like an adult. Like I am technically an adult. Like it's kind of crazy. I don't feel like one. I don't think I ever imagined myself as one. I've always imagined myself at 42, like over the age of 42. That's when I was like, oh yeah, this is when I really start living. But when I don't think I ever pictured my life after college. I couldn't picture. I didn't know what that would look like. All I knew at the time was that I didn't want to do architecture, and I didn't, thank God. But not that there's anything wrong with it, it just wasn't who I was. I just didn't like it. And like I like design, but I didn't like architecture because just I'm not, it's not that I'm good at design, it's just I'm not good at that kind of technical work. I suck at it. And yeah, that's I think one of the reasons, and that's why I also like I feel like I'm just rambling, and I'm so sorry, but I hope this kind of all makes sense, because I'm just want to kind of give you like my general thoughts over the last 4 months, because again I haven't really made a video or anything. So yeah, I think just basically growing up and realizing that, not growing up, but over the last 4 months, I feel like being completely independent, like separate, not independent, like independent, I mean like independent from, like separated from my family, is just like really been an insane thing. Because again, because I'm an adult and I moved as like an older person, not an older person, but a person like above the age of 18, which is when obviously a lot of people move to study abroad, like, for like to study or whatever. I'm like, it's like a very surreal thing. And even now when I'm talking about it, I feel like now I'm beginning to realize it. It's a very strange, but like I feel like such an important thing, and not because it's like, oh my god, you get to live around, like, no, it's kind of just like, who are you without all like without like, who are you without the culture that you grew up in? Like how much do you take from that outside of where you exist in? And that was kind of like my main thing. And that's kind of what the center of my thesis for this semester was. Just kind of leaving the Middle East and being like, holy shit, no one knows anything about us here. Like, other than like war, they're kind of like, what do you guys do over there? Other than like like the idea of like overconsumption and war for some reason defining factors of the Middle East. And it was kind of like a surreal thing because I was like, you guys do know that we live like normal lives. Like there isn't like this kind of concept of, we're not like constantly under threat of war. But I think that is the perception, because when you define like the Middle East, it's literally 12 countries. Like of course every single country is going to have a completely independent experience of the other country, but it was kind of like you're taken out of that environment and you're really looking, you're like, oh wow, I'm not the majority anymore, I am the minority in a specific environment. And it's not like, oh, I'm not a minority, it's like, no, like actually percentage wise. Because yeah, so that's kind of was where I kind of began to like foster this idea of my thesis, that I wanted to use, like I was looking up case studies of just like, I knew that I like graphic novels and comics, obviously, like I always have. And when I was like my first few weeks in university, like whenever I go into the library, that was kind of like my main section that I would hang out in. And then I was on Instagram, I think during class at one point, and it was like a break, and I was just like looking at comics, just like daily comics, just like people were making. And then I was like look, you know when you like go on Instagram and you like click that little button for it to tell you like other people that are similar. I found this artist called Gabrielle Bell, and then proceeded to read every single book that she ever wrote. I even have one right here. Okay, so this is like one of the books that I have of hers, and it's basically like just diary daily comics, you know. And that's kind of what inspired my entire thesis, was how come we have no stories like that of like daily diary comics that just document daily life from people that are Arab or Middle Eastern. Like there was nothing. And all the ones that I did find were revolving around, again, war, which is, again, I even said this in like my written thesis. I was like, not this class thesis, like my written report, that it's like these conversations are extremely important and extremely valuable, but they can't be the only conversation, you know, and especially the only conversation that's translated from Arabic, if that makes sense. So I have like a lot of books. I actually went to Sally Books. I think I'll show some videos of that before they close, and I got like a bunch of like comics and a lot of books, like they're graphic novels, and a lot of them don't talk about war, but nobody knows about these like these books whatsoever. And a lot of them like were Arabic to begin with or whatever. But like the main ones, that when I like say Middle Eastern comics, you think Persepolis, you think the Arabs of the Future, which all center around a very specific narrative of like instability. But there are like some really great ones, like Dina Muhammad's book Chubak Lubak, which is coming out in English in March of 2023, I think, or like spring. And that is just like a fictional tale, like documenting a specific kind of life that happens in Egypt. And it's really cool, and it just makes me sad, because I'm just like, there is so much nuance to the conversation that almost like doesn't exist. And that is basically what I like centered my entire thing on. So I basically did like a diary in London. That was basically my thing, and it's basically kind of, I drew an image every single day for about 20 days just to document. Well, I tried a month, but I physically couldn't. It was like impossible, because I realized in the beginning that I don't like the regular comic structure, so I kind of interweaved it into like kind of fragments. And it's kind of supposed to like represent the way that my own memory works to remember things. And it's kind of supposed to show like, okay, I'm in this new environment, but I have all of these old cultural beliefs that I'm like pulling with me, that I didn't even know existed until like I wrote it down. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like all of these things that are so normal to the human experience, like fear over my work and my job, like things don't do well on Instagram, and I'm like, oh my god, what if this is it for me? Like, what if that's it for my career? What if khalas, like I'm like, I should work, like what if I can't have the freelance job that I thought I could have, and all these things and all these fears that come out. And because I'm taken out of my environment where I had built my business, and now I'm not there anymore, and what does that look like now, and what does that look like in my head? And when you put it all down, you realize that, oh, we all literally have the same problems to some extent. We're all influenced by, like, obviously like the job thing isn't like a cultural thing, that's just like a human thing, that's just like people working thing, but it's more like different like I'm trying to think, oh, like for example, me and my friend, we went to a restaurant and she wears a hijab, and we were treated like really shittily in the restaurant, and I was like, what the hell, like this is kind of weird. Like they basically kicked us out, and it was wild because I was just like, what the fuck's happening? But they basically were like, oh, you didn't order enough food, and I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, we need the table, and I'm like, there's like 100 empty tables here, and I'm like, this is a mashed potato restaurant, like how much food am I supposed to order? I got a meal, I got a dish, like that's about it. And we basically left, and I was like, what the hell, that's kind of weird, that's never happened to me before. And then she looked at me and she's like, actually that happened to me multiple times. And I was like, oh, like is this a hijab thing? Like, and she was like, yeah, I'm starting to think that it might be. And that's like a thing that it's like a really big shift from something that I never, obviously, like I've never seen happen back in Kuwait, because obviously everyone's wears a hijab. But then moving abroad and being like, okay, this is very strange, especially in such like a metropolitan area. So stuff like that, and that's basically like the gist of it. And also, I forgot to mention, so when I basically did these like to figure out the bookbinding technique that I wanted, I actually took a bookbinding course in school, like a workshop, and this, like, it's just so cool. Like, this is called dos à dos, which is, I think means like door to door, no, back to back in French, or something like that. And basically you can like see, it's really, really cool. And this is just like an instant book, which is basically like how you make a zine. So I already know how to do that one, but it was just like really cool. I'm trying to see if I have anything else. My concertina method is there, but you'll just see that in the rest of the video. Yeah, that's basically the gist, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.